Today we are going to be talking about acid-base chemistry. And to begin with, we need to understand the characteristics of an acid and the characteristics of a base. Let's start with an acid. Now, when we think of acids, we usually think of very corrosive substances that would eat through any type of material. But there are many useful acids found around our house, even our kitchen. And so one characteristic of an acid is that acids taste sour. Now, as a reminder, if you are in the lab and you have an unknown substance, it is unsafe to taste that. Secondly, acids are covalent compounds that, when in water, can conduct electricity. We can talk about that later. A third characteristic of acids is that when tested with litmus paper, an acid will turn blue litmus paper red. And the last characteristic of acids is that they are proton donators. Now let's take a look at bases. Bases, if you would taste them, have a bitter taste. Again, there's many substances around our kitchen that are bases and have a bitter taste. Remember, though, that if you are in the lab and you have an unknown substance, it is unsafe to taste that. Secondly, bases, when in water, have a slippery feel. Third, bases, when tested with litmus paper, will turn red litmus paper blue. And the last characteristic of bases is that bases are proton acceptors. Knowing the characteristics of acids and bases is important. So to help you learn them, we are going to perform the following lab together. I need you to have a sheet of paper and a pencil so that you can go ahead and write down our objective and what question we're trying to answer, what we're testing, and the results that we get. The purpose of our lab today is to examine common household examples of acid and bases. The question is, can you identify common household acids and bases? Remember your characteristics as we go through this lab. Let's begin with an apple. When I take a bite of this apple, does this apple taste sour or bitter? Let's go ahead and write down our thought. Think about when you take a bite of an apple, does that apple taste sour or does it taste bitter? I think that the apple, if I have to choose between one of those twos, would taste sour. Now let's go ahead and let's test that with litmus paper. We said that acids turn blue litmus paper red. Here's a fun fact. What really is litmus paper? Well, litmus paper is taken from lichens and put on filter paper. So it's kind of dissolved in water, and that dye is then put on filter paper, and it is what we call an indicator. In our next lab, we are going to be looking at a common household indicator that we can make right here in the kitchen that will give us a better idea of how strong an acid is or how strong the base is. But right now, I'm going to take a sheet of blue litmus paper, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press that against where I took a bite of my apple. And if it is an acid, the litmus paper should turn what color? That's right, red. Okay, and there we have it. What do you see there? Where the litmus paper was pressed into the apple, the blue litmus paper turned red. So we can say that an apple then would be an acid. Let's go ahead and test our apple with some litmus paper. Now, what is litmus paper? Litmus paper is a water-soluble dyes that are extracted from lichen. Remember lichen from biology class? And then that solution is put on some filter paper. And this is called an indicator. It tells us whether something is an acid or a base. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we suspect that the apple is acid because it tastes sour. So I'm going to go ahead and take a piece of blue litmus paper and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press it against the apple where I took a bite. And if the apple is an acid, blue litmus paper should turn red. Let's take a look. And there we have it. The blue litmus paper turns red. Let's go ahead and test that with a sheet of red litmus paper. What do you suspect will happen when we put the red litmus paper on the apple? Do you think it'll change colors? Red litmus paper on acid will be what color? Let's take a look. We see no color change. The red litmus paper, when put on acid, remains red. Okay, next we are going to test a household all-purpose cleaner. Here I have Windex, and I'm going to spray some on this saucer. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm not going to taste this, but I do want to feel it. Now, remember, a base will feel slippery. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit on my finger and rub it between my thumb and index finger. And that definitely has a slippery feel to it. Let me go ahead and confirm my guess with litmus paper. So if I take red litmus paper, we know that a base turns red litmus paper, what color? Blue. So I'm going to go ahead and take my red litmus paper, I'm going to set it in there. And can you see that? It has turned the paper blue. It might be better if you can see it on the saucer. If you're not convinced of that, I'm going to leave that in there. It actually is turning a darker blue. So let's go ahead and test that with a piece of blue litmus paper. A base on blue litmus paper will be what color? Blue. Okay, so I've just confirmed that my all-purpose cleaner does feel slippery. And it does turn red litmus paper blue. Okay, here I have a test tube rack filled with several other household substances. We're going to go ahead and begin with this test tube. And this test tube has soap in it. Now what I prepared in advance was I shaved some bar soap. I put about 3/4 of it in this test tube, and then I filled the rest of the test tube with distilled water. I put my finger over it and I shook vigorously for about 2 minutes so it would get dissolved. Now we want to find out if soap is an acid or a base. I don't want to taste this, but I can go ahead and I can feel it. Put a little bit on my finger. And I can feel that definitely feels slippery. I'm going to test my guess with litmus paper. So I would use, if I think it's a base, I would use what colored litmus paper? Red, that is correct. So I'm going to take a sheet of red litmus paper, and when I put it in a base, it should turn the litmus paper what color? That's correct, blue. So I'm going to slip it in there. And I'm also going to test it with a sheet of blue litmus paper. And as I pull that out, I notice that the blue litmus paper is remaining blue, and the red litmus paper has turned a slight blue. And I don't know if you can see that on the screen or not. So, soap is also slippery and would be a base. The next common household substance that I have in this test tube is orange juice. Now, if you think about when you drink orange juice in the morning, does it taste sour or does it taste bitter? That's right, it tastes sour. So we know that one of the characteristics of an acid is that it tastes sour. So let's go ahead and confirm our suspicion. What color litmus paper should we test the orange juice with? Okay, we're going to test blue litmus paper. And when we put it in the orange juice, if it is an acid, it will turn the blue litmus paper, what color? Red. So I slip it in there and I pull it out, and that is very easy to see the color change. Our next household substance that we're going to be testing is blue, and this is toilet bowl cleaner. Now, this can be quite caustic, so I'm not going to touch it with my hands. What do you think toilet bowl cleaner would be? We don't want to taste it to see if it tastes sour. I don't want to touch it to see if it feels slippery. So let's go ahead and test it with our litmus paper. I'm going to take a sheet of blue litmus paper. If toilet bowl cleaner is an acid, it will turn this blue litmus paper red. I'm going to go ahead and dip that in and pull that out, and we can see that it is definitely red, which means this toilet bowl cleaner is indeed an acid. Let's go ahead and just confirm with red litmus paper. Red litmus paper in acid is going to be red, and we see no color change there. So our toilet bowl cleaner is definitely an acid because it turns blue litmus paper red. Our last test tube has some Comet in it, that's that scouring powder. And I put a little bit in the test tube and then filled the rest of the test tube up with distilled water and let that kind of mix in for a while. And this is, we don't want to taste this. We could try feeling it, so I could put a little bit on my finger to see how it feels. And it does kind of have a slippery feel. A slippery feel means that it would be a base. So I'm going to test that with what color litmus paper? Okay, red. I'm going to take red litmus paper. If it's a base, this red litmus paper should turn blue. So I'll dip it in there and pull it out, and we definitely see that that is blue. Go ahead and test it with blue litmus paper. Dip it in. Pull it out, we see no color change. So we have tested a variety of common household substances to help us remember the characteristics of an acid and a base. Let's review those. Remember that an acid will taste sour. An acid is a covalent compound that when in water can conduct electricity. An acid will turn blue litmus paper red. And acids are proton donators. The characteristics of bases are they taste bitter. Bases also feel slippery. Bases turn red litmus paper blue. And bases are proton acceptors. Thank you for joining ChemFire. On our next lab, we'll be looking at how you can use an indicator to find out how strong or weak an acid is and how strong and weak a base is.